Season's greetings. Hope you're staying toasty out there. It's time for another mirth and merriment-filled episode of Vaguely Scientific. I am a very merry Derek, and it's a very foggy winter night, so Jim, with your nose so full of science, won't you co-host this podcast?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you were all bullying me for the first 8 years of my life, but I guess I'll pull it together and, not hold a grudge.
I wasn't alive for the first 8 years of your life.
I mean, let's pull aside the curtain. You very much were. I am not 8 years older than you.
No, but I wasn't alive for all of the 8 years.
Oh, not all of them, no.
Okay.
I was making a reference to Rudolph and how he is a much better person than I'll ever be.
Oh, I just actually thought you were talking about how we picked on you as kids.
Oh, no. I was referencing the thing you were referencing.
Gotcha. Ugh. All right. Through the power of holiday magic, we are joined by our guest this week, Anne. Hello, Anne.
Hi, I'm here to talk about Christmas and help you exploit Jim.
Yay!
And you're all out of Christmas.
That is... What a stupid intro.
Yeah, who wrote that?
Who wrote that? We should fire that guy. Well, this is the last episode of Vaguely Scientific for the year 2023, which means we're back up at the North Pole helping jolly old St. Nick load up his sleigh. That's right, it's the Christmas episode of that Yuletide show where listeners send in vaguely scientific questions to hear our holly jolly answers. But first, it's time for the fun science fact of the winter solstice.
Mars has polar ice caps just like the Earth's. And just like the Earth's, they are mostly water ice. However, Mars's winters get cold enough that there can also be carbon dioxide ice as well. Ooh. So Santa's going to need to bundle up when he opens his Mars branch.
That's dry ice, right?
Yeah. I believe that it freezes at negative 108, so...
Okay. So are there polar bears or penguins on the poles of Mars?
Neither.
Oh, that's disappointing.
No, we got to import those.
Do we?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Let's terraform Mars specifically for polar bears and penguins.
I mean, there was the episode of Futurama where they turned Pluto into a penguin preserve.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Dang it, they stole my idea.
In advance.
In the past.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of things that aren't my idea, maybe we should move on to our first question this week. I don't know. I try with the segues sometimes.
Yes, I've heard worse.
So question 1 for the wintry times this year. What do the 3 ghosts of the Christmas timeline do when they aren't tormenting Scrooge?
Did you know there's an episode of DuckTales about this? The modern DuckTales, I should specify.
I did not.
Where they were not tormenting Scrooge McDuck because he's a fairly decent person, actually. But they were going to his house on Christmas Eve and partying. And they would choose to go back in time and relive past parties as well. So... that's sort of an answer to this question. Wrong Scrooge, but definitely ghosts of past, present, and future Christmases.
Well, I guess they aren't tormenting him, so...
Yeah.
Admittedly, I don't think they're tormenting him in the original either. They're teaching him very important lessons.
Oh,
he's just grumpy about it.
Yeah.
He just doesn't wanna.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's fair. I feel like only one of them is arguably really tormenting him.
Is it the future one?
It's the future one, because and that's just because that's the tough love one.
I mean, is it though? Because it's also easily the most indifferent one.
True.
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily, like, I don't know. That's getting away from the question already, but like,
well, that's okay.
Oh yeah, you should have heard the last one we recorded.
I would like to posit, getting back to the point of this question, right?
Mhm.
Three ghosts of the Christmas timeline do when they're not tormenting Scrooge also suggests that it doesn't just say what do they do when it's not Christmas. It's just specifically Scrooge, who admittedly they reform over the course of one Christmas night.
Right.
Yeah.
So do they do it to other people?
Yeah, like is Scrooge just one in particular that like that was their assignment that year?
Oh, that's interesting.
Or
yeah, I guess so. Like every year they would just go and choose a new person, or like, yeah, are they who's assigning ghosts to people? Is it like, I don't know, I lost my train of thought.
I really wanted to see where you were going with that.
I was trying to think of something from It's a Wonderful Life, but I was like, I don't know exactly what, like, they were talking galaxies who I assume were like archangels.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Joseph, right?
Yeah, that's right. So like, is it the guys from, is it the archangels that are going around assigning Christmas ghosts?
I mean, there absolutely are versions of A Christmas Carol. It's not addressed in the original.
Right.
But there absolutely are adaptations that do kind of try to tackle that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of like the most recent that I have seen. There was that A Christmas Carol, I think it came out in 2018. I wrote it down. Yes, A Christmas Carol in 2018, which was done by FX and BBC in partnership, which was like a kind of like edgy TV show.
Great.
But it did play with the idea of, it's a mix of like almost a curse from Mrs. Cratchit.
Oh, interesting.
Where she kind of like wishes something on Scrooge because there's more to their relationship. Like she interacts with Scrooge directly in that series. Okay. But also it plays with the idea that Marley, in the time he has died, has been stuck in purgatory.
Yeah.
And the way he gets out of purgatory is converting Scrooge.
Oh.
I wanted to touch on that just a little bit to say that I want to kind of define what ghost means, because in A Christmas Carol, just the original source material, we have Marley who shows up and says, "You will be visited by 3 more spirits."
Yeah.
So assuming he is a spirit himself, but also one of the things Marley does is show Scrooge other spirits that walk the earth that have also built up chains in life.
Mm-hmm.
And these chains, of course, are the sins I've committed in life. So like very purgatorious. But then the ghosts that do come are the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. These are no longer disembodied, like dead people. So I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's in my notes as well, is that they are very much... Marley is like a known entity to Scrooge. He's somebody he knew in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But again, all the spirits are things he can't really identify. And again, they're spirits, not ghosts, which suggests that maybe they were never human entities at all.
Oh.
Yeah. And they're more
like the archangel.
They could, they're some kind of supernatural being, and that is their state.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think is always very interesting to me, and I don't really know a lot about the history of sort of the modern artistic interpretation of Santa, but I have frequently seen artwork that the Ghost of Christmas Present is Santa, and I think in a very early adaptation, or not adaptation, but like a very early like published copy of the original work, one of the pictures is a very like portly bearded gentleman.
All right, Derek, do you want to take this one or do you want me to?
Please,
because I feel like we're both sitting here like we know.
Well, you can cover like the actual thing. I just wanted to briefly mention he's the inspiration for the artistic representation of Father Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrote in my notes, I have no scientific backing, no scholarly research to support this, but in my own personal headcanon, the Ghost of Christmas Present just is Santa. So That's all I wanted to say, but there's more.
I was expecting something bad, actually. So I'm glad that was all it was.
No,
okay.
it's literally when you said in a very early iteration that the visual you are thinking of is down to Dickens's illustrator.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And, like the woodblock
See, I didn't know when that
paintings.
picture came into being because I read it in like 7th grade literature class, and it was like in one of those thick like compendium textbook kind of things.
Yeah, those sketch etchings are part of the original.
Oh wow!
But
That's
Dickens does describe in the text as like he what he is describing with his words is the Victorian idea of Father Christmas.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a very deliberate connection.
And it is before Santa Claus was like a big popular.
Okay, yeah.
Like Father Christmas came before Santa Claus took over the mantle, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's also worth noting in that case too is during Present's time with Scrooge, towards the end, he takes Scrooge to go see a bunch of different things, and they make references to like they go abroad, they go to different countries, they go to different places, and in the same way that like our Santa myths have him traveling all over the world at night, they literally do that in one Christmas night.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just part of my headcanon Santa mythos is that he's also he's elevated to the status of Ghost of Christmas Present.
On that note, though, again, what do they do when they're not with Scrooge? That's an interesting contrast because Present is the only ghost that specifically talks about his lifespan.
Yeah.
Where he flat out tells Scrooge, my life upon this globe is very brief. He only lives for a night.
Right.
Essentially. And Scrooge watches him get older throughout their time together. His hair goes gray. He becomes clearly
detail, yeah.
older.
Yeah.
And then he just vanishes at the end of their time together. So it's the one ghost where it's very much implied that he literally just exists for the time period they are together and then ceases to exist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't cover, does he respawn every Christmas because it is Christmas present?
And
or
is it
a
the
brand
same
new
consciousness?
present?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, is it
yeah.
a different ghost? But that's the one specific one that is like, I just cease to exist at this point.
That's interesting.
Which has horrific implications for Santa, but we won't go there.
That's true.
Well, so, Christmas Carol is an allegory, right? Like, there's no disputing that. So it's important, I guess, a little bit to point out that Ebenezer Scrooge, in the context of the story, represents an individual person, but Ebenezer Scrooge represents England at the time that Dickens was writing it.
Well, specifically the upper class.
Yeah,
England.
but
Mm-hmm.
the people who would consider themselves England.
Absolutely.
But so this is, I mean, the Ghost of Christmas Present is kind of the first I was reading a little bit about this, is the first concept that Dickens came up with, specifically with the two children, which were, was it one of them is want. I'm not sure if the other one is need. I don't remember.
Ignorance, isn't it?
Ignorance. Maybe it's ignorance, but it's the two children.
It's literally, the book is right next to me. I will report.
Okay.
I had it ready.
Well, it's the two children that are the ones that the Ghost of Christmas Present presents as these are the biggest concern. These are like things that you are blind to, but they exist all the time. So I think the Ghost of Christmas Present in that sense, like, is always going to be kind of summoned as long as that exists in the world, which, spoiler alert, it still does.
Yeah. They are ignorance and want. The boy is ignorance,
That's it.
the girl is want.
Yeah. I knew want. I couldn't.
On that note, it's also interesting that Dickens chose to write A Christmas Carol instead of a pamphlet about the plight of poor children.
True. True. I mean,
pamphlets, that's hard work.
It's easier to teach through stories, though, like, because there are a lot of people, even who we might assign as being Ebenezer Scrooge's negative qualities, who would read A Christmas Carol and think, yeah, we also disagree with what Ebenezer Scrooge did. And it like gets to you, like, because it is a person, because you then sympathize with that. It's easier to teach that than it is to go out and say, hey, rich people, stop abusing the poor. You know, they're gonna be like, I don't do that.
Right.
Mm.
Well, I mean, that is kind of also why. So a thing I have in my notes with all the different spirits is I have kind of aspects of them that I find interesting, but I also, for all of them, have like a weird alternative career to suggest.
I like it.
Well, because it's like, what do they do when they're not doing it? I'm like, I immediately took that as like, what are their day jobs?
Their day jobs.
But I was like, out of all of them, not only is Present also like the most human of them, right? He's described very solidly, easy to perceive. And if we assume that he doesn't cease to exist after a day, like he's probably a reform worker. Like he's a social worker, he's an advocate, he's a social activist, like a child care worker. Like he's probably doing something like that.
He's just going. He's not just the ghost of Christmas, but like he does the same thing every night, just less festively.
Yeah, he just put on his robe for this one. Like,
that's good. Well, so you have one for the other two then.
I absolutely do.
Okay. Well, which one?
Before you do,
okay.
I have a question about the Ghost of Christmas Future.
Okay.
It's supposed to be the Grim Reaper? Or is that post-production mythos?
So in the text, it is described as just a large black cloak of which he can't see anything except for one spectral hand.
Yeah.
And he uses the phrase spectral, but also there's a point where Scrooge can touch the hand.
Yeah.
So like it's at least corporal for also ghostly Scrooge, I guess. But there are no other details besides a large black cloak.
It's supposed to be unknown, ominous, and foreboding, right? And the later you go into the night, the closer you get to it, the more tangible it becomes, because it is the future. It is literal uncertainty. So that's what, the whole thing are these shadows of things that may be, or shadows of things that will be. Like he doesn't answer you.
He's also, I mean, a lot of people, Grim Reaper as an embodiment of death, because he really only shows Scrooge things in relation to death. It's not necessarily just the future vague. It's specifically what happens when people die, both Scrooge and Tim.
This is as far as you're going to get, Scrooge. So like, I'm not going to show you any more than that. This is one possible ending, but either way, it is the ending. I thought on that note, something interesting. I want to circle back to all the points that we keep straying from, but I just feel like that's a good note to make, that I have seen depictions of ringing in the new year as the previous year being like an old elderly man, and then the new year being a baby. And I think it's interesting that the Ghost of Christmas Past is described as youthful, because they've like accrued more years than the other two.
Can I be pedantic about that?
Sure.
I think Past as youthful is more of an adaptation thing.
Okay.
Because again, in the text, it's the person is, or the spirit, right? Like there isn't a gender. The spirit is described as both old and young at the same time, like depending on how you look at it. It's very much a shapeshifter. Because at other points, it's like, at one point its belt is glittering bright, and other times it's wrapped in darkness. Sometimes it's a creature with like a bunch of legs. Sometimes it's a person. Like it's every time the spirit is described, it's like a holographic like trick of the light. It can shift your perception. So it's not. Young is the first description of it, and I think people were just like, young.
Yeah.
But it also is described as, but if I look at it this way, the hair is long and white and there are wrinkles about its face.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very telling then that these are definitely not ghosts. These are metaphysical beings that are, they've never been human. And I think that's, so far we've sort of just explained that very, very well by describing them. Like there's no question about it.
So what I wrote on that point specifically, the difference between ghost as in dead person and ghost as in like some abstract spirit thing. I have seen, and I guess I personally have never really thought of it this way before, but I've seen people writing on the internet about how Charles Dickens wrote a contemporary for the time fairy tale. And the ghosts of the, past, present, and future, they're very much like personifications of these things that like people have given life to.
Mhm.
And that's very like fairy creature, which I thought was neat.
Well, he has a whole actual Christmas ghost story that features fairies.
Yeah. There's like a whole book
True.
of Christmas stories that nobody knows.
Ghosts is, a lot of time, I mean, even his texts, they're referred to as spirits. Ghost is like a kind of rewrite of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, and I don't have the text in front of me, but I know that Scrooge refers to them as spirits, but I'm trying to think if calling them Ghost of Christmas Present is in the text or if it's just a colloquial thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna find out.
You're going to find out. Okay.
He should have just gone around calling them like, former bit of undigested beef, present bit of undigested beef, beef of the future.
Yeah. Some old spoiled gruel that...
Yeah.
I mean, they call themselves ghosts.
They do.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Ghost of Christmas Present and such. Yeah. Well, I mean, Future doesn't call himself anything, but...
Fair,
Fair.
yeah.
So give me another one of your day job ones.
All right. So, past, because shapeshifter, fluctuating appearance, you'll never know, is an actor/cosplayer.
I'm glad we touched on that before you said that. Now the context makes sense.
Yeah. Because you never know what they're going to show up as next. And they just
They're
go
an
to
actor.
Comic-Cons, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, if they're an actor, they'd have all of the lines memorized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and they kind of play parts in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, also, in other
True.
adaptations, there's the idea that like the Christmas past isn't just necessarily hanging out next to Scrooge. Like I've seen stage adaptations where past becomes one of the people from his past.
Yeah, and kind of personifies the illusions, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So that's my past day job.
Mm-hmm.
You want to know Future while we're here?
I do.
All right.
So it's McDonald's, isn't it?
It's not.
What?
Okay, but I also want to say there's an absolute reason for it.
Okay.
So death, when Scrooge is having his like last freak out, after he finds out he dies, this cloaked figure, he tries to clutch at it. And in the text, it is described as suddenly it shifts form and he's back in his bed and this cloaked figure has shrunk and collapsed and suddenly it's a bedpost. Like it becomes part of his room. So Christmas Future, when not tormenting Scrooge on Christmas, is a sleep paralysis demon.
Niche job there.
Yeah.
But the idea of like,
pay?
oh no, something's in the figure of my room. Oh, it's just a hat stand. Like, it's very much that.
That's what it's doing. Yeah.
It's just the Ghost of Christmas Future. I'm in good standing. I'm a good person, so he's just gonna stand there and be creepy. I'm not worried.
Listen, I'm standing by my reasoning.
I like the idea that it's just like killing time until next Christmas.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, Ghost of Christmas Past is in a show on off Broadway right now, and Christmas Present is doing all this paperwork, making sure all these kids are getting food and stuff, and I'm just kind of like hanging out. I'm a coat rack right now. Nope, it wasn't me.
That's I feel like there's an episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog about shadow people, and I feel like that is exactly what the Ghost of Christmas Future does. He just messes with people for fun.
Messes with people for fun.
Yes. I mean, he actually was a stunt double in Lord of the Rings briefly, but like, we don't talk
right.
about
That got that gig when Galadriel, who is Christmas Past. That's the first That's the first character in Lord of the Rings whose name came to mind. I don't know why.
I mean, admittedly, as a not quite old, not quite young.
Well, there you go.
You know
I
what?
Definitely did that on purpose.
And she does kind of glow.
She does kind of glow.
Because that's another thing about Past, right? Is that like there's a light about them, and then they get put out. They have a cap that looks like a candle extinguisher, like a
Who
candle
played
snuffer.
Galadriel?
Kate Blanchett.
Kate Blanchett. Kate Blanchett is the ghost of Christmas Past now, officially in my head.
I mean, we can't say no.
I'm gonna write her some fan mail and be like, I found you out. I know it was you. I shouldn't actually do that.
You could probably just tweet at her and it would never come to anything.
Just because, Christmas Carol by itself kind of is a morality tale at the end of the day, and the ghosts are sent to teach Scrooge a lesson. So the idea of like what are they doing otherwise, they also, this ties in otherwise that they might be reforming other people when not reforming Scrooge, just maybe not in a Christmas theme, because we also see in various stories all around the world of like a ghost or spirit coming to try and teach someone a lesson, right? But then on the other side, we also see them not necessarily good lessons. Like I'm thinking immediately of like the ghost of Hamlet's father being like, hey, could you do a murder for me? Cool. Like
avenge me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am the ghost of Christmas murder, most fun.
But like there's the idea maybe that they are also like just messengers of some sort.
What does the ghost of Christmas murder look like?
Hamlet's
father.
That's fair. You know what? Okay.
The old King Hamlet.
I guess I could have put that together on my own. Ghosts
exist for a really long time, and the Hamlet family dies out like immediately, so he's got to do something. He's still stuck in this moral plane.
Wait, there is a script. I haven't read this script. It kind of looks like a show I don't want to do based on the fact that I've read a lot of scripts where people just randomly invoke allusions to Shakespeare because they can't do anything else. But
and it's always just Hamlet or Mackers because that's the only two they know.
Yeah. It's I'm showing you that I know Shakespeare. Well, you know of Hamlet. I mean, that's anyway, this play is called I Hate Hamlet. I forget who wrote it. But I read the premise because I was looking at plays to possibly produce. And the premise is that I forget his name, but somebody who famously played Hamlet in the past. There's like a TV personality who gets cast as Hamlet and doesn't think that he's going to do a good job. So the ghost of a former Hamlet shows up and like needs him to take the stage and stuff. And it's very much the ghost of Hamlet past.
Huh.
And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody has adapted Christmas Carol into Hamlet. And now I'm upset about it.
Well, let's immediately not talk about that.
Let's not talk about this anymore.
I regret bringing up Hamlet, but I guess the reason I brought that up is because the idea that like maybe they are also messengers.
No, that makes sense because
elsewhere.
It's a ghost. Like even Marley is doing that. Like
it also does beg the question of like kind of what happens to Marley afterwards, though, because like he's already experiencing his punishment. He's allowed to go and warn his friend.
Yeah.
Or coworker. I don't know how, did Scrooge have friends? ? But like is Marley now part of like the band?
Oh.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because it suggests that the three spirits, past, present, future, have their shtick down, right? They know what time they're coming. They know what they're going to show them. They're very confident. But like Marley is like a little pre-warn thing. And if we play with the idea that the ghosts pick like a new person to reform every year, do they have to find somebody else in their life to give them the warning? Or is it just going to be Marley every time and Scrooge just happened to know him?
What if Marley had to arrange it? Like the ghost, like Marley had to actually submit Scrooge for this visitation thing.
Oh, it's like what not to wear. You submit a friend you think needs help.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
You know what? Honestly, that is, I think, that's perfect. I love that so much, actually.
Well, actually, so I have in the notes here, there's also iterations. I was in a musical version of Christmas Carol many years ago that it's irrelevant. But the way the casting worked in that is that all of our ghosts also played townspeople that like Scrooge interacts with in the little opening number. And I'm trying to remember if Present was one of the guys asking for donations, because of course he was.
Mm-hmm.
Future was a lamplighter.
Oh, okay.
Like he was in all black and like lighting lamps. And then I think, or no, I lied. Past was a lamplighter and future was a chimney sweep.
Oh, because the lamplighter would be with the candle.
Yeah. But it does kind of suggest, and the way we staged it was that all of those people as he's interacting give him like very significant looks. Like they don't act like the rest of the townspeople. And then later, after he reforms and they see him later, he encounters all three of them again in their like person form. And then we have Scrooge doing double takes at them, except for Future because he doesn't know.
Like
but it does kind of
him.
It does kind of suggest that the ghosts themselves are like picking the target.
That's neat. That's a neat way to do it.
And then they sent Marley as like the harbinger to be like, hey, maybe he'll listen to you, and if not, we'll just go do it.
We'll do it anyway, yeah.
Do you guys ever wonder if Marley also was visited?
Oh, I never thought about that.
And didn't reform? I've wondered that a lot.
Oh,
that's the thing, because that would be a hard story to do as like, because I can see that as being one of these like Cruella de Vil Disney prequels nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with it is that like you'd have to see the spirits fail.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't listen to them. And he didn't heed he does say like he didn't heed the warnings he had heard in life.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just that's not related to anything, but it's a thing I have thought about sometimes because I like Christmas Carol and retellings of A Christmas Carol. It's one of my favorite Christmas stories, obviously. It's a thing I think about is like, who is Marley as a character? Because we know Scrooge. We get to know Scrooge really well. We get to see his childhood. We get to see all of it. But like, we
just get to see Marley working at Fezziwig's, and that's about. We already knew they were business partners,
right? And then we know how he ended up. But it kind of does beg the question of like, why is he? I mean, he's sent to warn Scrooge as an example of like what he could become, and it's personal. But like, why is it Marley and not Fan? Scrooge's sister, for people who don't remember, like who dies but like cared about him a lot.
Yeah.
Why is it not her being like, what have you turned into?
Well, because that's more judgmental, whereas Marley is showing this is what happened to me. It certainly is. And like from a narrative perspective, we can talk about it. But in the perspective of like the spirit world, it also suggests that Fan, who was a good person, is at rest. Because again, Dickens is writing from a very Christian perspective. And Marley is still in this purgatory, tormented and sort of thing. Yeah. And it's supposed to be spooky.
It is, but I don't know. It's just, it's a thought about like ghost logic that I have.
Listeners, I personally enjoy these episodes where we abandon science and talk strictly about classic literature. Let us know what you think. But in the meantime, we have a second question for the holiday season this year.
Radical.
Could you have a snowball war? Ooh, I said that all ominous like.
Here's the thing. I think no.
You think no? Okay.
I don't think you can have a snowball war, but I do think you could use snow as a weapon.
Okay.
All right, I have a question on that then. What is discounting snowball war? Like, are you saying you couldn't name a war that? Because wars have been named dumber things.
Yeah, like the pig war.
We did have a cold war, so that was close.
Oh, and the emu war. Right.
So like when you're like, you can't have a snowball war, you absolutely can have a war and just call it that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that, with the way the things are now, the modern definition of war and the very modern, here's all the different things you can do with high explosives, for instance. I think snow is not going to be a weapon on the battlefield that's going to be particularly useful.
Okay.
So you're assuming it's like a global scale modern conflict, though?
Yeah.
when you talk about like, could you have a snowball war? The idea, most wars are started like wars over resources and or like more specific conflicts. So I absolutely think you could have a snowball war.
You would just have to hit Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the head with a snowball.
Sillier things have happened.
But like it could though. Like if theoretically, if you had some conflict where two nations that were already high tensions and looking for an excuse to kill somebody, and some high-ranking diplomat was hit in the head with like an icy snowball by an activist from another country, and they were like, it was an assassination attempt, and they went to war. Do you think future historians would lose the chance to call that the snowball war?
It's not as funny as my laughter implies. Not that you're not. I should clarify. What you said was funny in an academic sense, but the fact that it could happen and you're correct that it could happen is sobering.
Oh yeah,
I'm here to just ruin reality for you.
Okay, so this is maybe neither here nor there at this point, but I wanted to point out that if we take the root of snowball war, which would obviously be snowball fight, in my experience, my experience is bad because there were a lot of bigger kids that. Never mind. There are rare.
Derek, are you okay?
I need an adult.
Did you have a flashback to the war?
So let me back up here. When somebody says they are having a snowball fight, I think that it is not really something we interpret as they were having an actual fight with anyone. They so like surely you can actually hurt somebody with a snowball. You can use ice, you can put gravel in the snowball. It happened. Don't do it. But usually when people are having a snowball fight, it is a mock conflict, right? Because snowballs don't actually hurt. So I was thinking, what if we scaled that up? And I kind of looked into how elaborate could we make a snow-themed mock battle, I guess, is what I looked at.
I'm here for that conversation.
I bet you. I mean, I've seen a lot of people do this with like Nerf guns and just have like giant Nerf wars across an entire meadow with cover and ammo depots and things like that. I'm sure you could do something like that with, 40 or 50 full-grown adults and snowballs.
I actually should have considered the idea of Nerf, but I looked at if snow-themed firearms could work, and basically that directed me to an episode of Mythbusters in which they disproved that you can use an ice bullet because it would just burn up.
Oh, I saw that one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting note. I don't remember this, but they said you could use a bullet made out of meat and it would like not leave a trace, which is
yikes,
weird. But so I looked at, you couldn't use like modern warfare. Maybe you could use things that are kind of like crossbows or like Nerf style guns that fling things rather than combust. But that led me to think that like siege weaponry, like catapults and stuff, would be more in line with like flinging large amounts of snow at things. And I don't know about either of you, but when I was a kid, I actually know this about both of you, but I'm still saying it to give you your agency in this. But we used to build snow forts in addition to snowmen, right? So like right there is precedent for it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, true. And I feel like you could also build like if the snow's deep enough, you could build like snow trenches.
Ooh.
And you could sort of use those as covering fire areas.
So listen, to quote every medieval warfare specialist ever, dig a ditch.
Snow trebuchet.
Dig a ditch.
Sorry, what?
Dig a ditch.
Oh.
Yeah. So
already the idea of like, you already have built it. I'm about to just go off, guys. Buckle up.
Go for it.
So snow forts, right?
Yeah.
Snow by itself, if we're talking about just dealing with people on foot, is already a wonderful thing for the people behind the walls.
Oh,
Mm.
yeah.
Because it's really easy, or it's really hard for people to advance through thick snow quickly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's resistance there. Now, like, unless they show up in, like, cross-country skis, that's a whole nother thing.
Oh, but that's part of it.
Right? But the idea, a big part of fortifications is high, thick walls, multiple of them if you can, and ditches in between, low ground. So if they get over one wall, then they're stuck between. But snow has the advantage that not only can it be like ditches that are hard to climb, but you can freeze those over. So now it's just an icy slip and slide that somebody has to grapple their way up.
Mhm.
Moats won't work the same way for the same reason of freezing. However,
Oh.
I mean, it also suggests, though, that siege warfare, depending on how long the siege is, you might win out anyway because if the snow starts to melt.
Oh, that's
You know,
fair.
I said snow trebuchet as a joke, but now I'm thinking like if you roll up like a 3x3, snowball, that would be a great base for a snowman, and you put it into a trebuchet, that could kill a person.
Well, also, I think Derek at some point said crossbows. I have in my notes, listen, if I had a mold that I could pour water into and freeze munitions in certain shapes, I could make an ice quarrel that absolutely would kill someone, and it would just be loaded into normal crossbows.
Mhm. I always heard that you could make an ice knife that could potentially like hurt someone real bad.
And it would not be durable, but it could be sharp. So yeah.
Yeah.
If
only
it
needs to
comes
work
in with
once.
enough force and it gets through the body,
Mhm.
like that's still a puncture wound, and then the
Hang
heat
on,
of the
did we
body
do an
melts.
episode?
Wait, hold on. If it goes in and the heat of the body melts the ice out of it, then you're just free bleeding out.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. We did at one point do an episode about what tools could you make out of ice, and I think we mentioned knives.
Yeah.
And because I talked about musical instruments because there was an ice orchestra I found once.
Oh, yeah. What kind of... It was episode 19.
That's a very long
Way
time
back.
ago.
Yeah, that was over 100 episodes ago. That is wild.
I know that Marcus was on that episode.
Yes. This was May of 2019. We have been around a long time.
It's too long. I'm too old. I'm getting too old. For
I
this.
meant the show.
That's what me too.
Oh, okay.
So I looked up on the note of snow forts.
Mm-hmm.
Just basically scaling it up. I mean, I made a bunch of dumb rules in my head, but like I didn't write anything down. But like I kind of was playing with honor system staying on theme. So I basically like how much can I scale up without going into we just make giant liquid nitrogen bombs. I don't know. It's loose. It's a loose rule system. But I looked up I knew that these existed, but I didn't know much about them, but I looked up ice hotels.
Yeah.
And what I didn't know, and I guess it makes sense, but I wasn't like I'd never researched it before, but ice hotels are temporary structures that are built like basically annually. They have a construction period, which, makes sense because they would melt, but I just never really thought about it before. But they can get some really elaborate, like you could build if money is no object and everybody is just committed to snow war, you could make castles out of ice, and like that would be really cool.
I mean, if the war was happening in like Nome, Alaska, that would probably last most of a year, I would say.
Yeah, it's saying like they basically start construction begins November,
Mm-hmm.
and then it goes through most of the year.
I mean, we have technology. The idea of like how to keep an ice skating rink frozen
Yeah.
indoors that I'm sure you could apply also to kind of give these structures more longevity, depending on how committed to this war we're going to be.
I'm seeing like a live like a LARP sort of situation where just everybody has agreed we're going to do snowball war.
Mm-hmm.
It would probably be really expensive, but it would be really cool. Literally cool. I'm sorry. I didn't do that on purpose.
It's also, it does beg the question, because so I looked at this question purely from like, you know, a medieval siege warfare type thing, because that's what I immediately thought of, like snowballs and snow forts make me think of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, another aspect of warfare is going to be armor.
Ooh.
So obviously you need things to keep warm. So we're talking about layers, kind of snowsuits. But I was thinking of like, okay, what kind of things are you protecting against if the munitions themselves are snowballs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unlike medieval armor now, where the idea is I want a sword blow to glance off. So it's smooth, a lot of curved edges.
Yeah.
With the exception of kind of maybe some nobles or fancy armors with some spikes to like catch a blade because they can. I feel like snowball armor would be the opposite of that, because I want to break up the packed snowball before the full force of it hits me. So if my armor has spikes coming out on it, it's going to break up that packed snow or potentially shatter ice before it gets to me.
Yeah, and you'd want hydrophobic materials. Because like part of the danger would be getting wet.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking like wearing fur and like winter clothing would be the first thing I'd think of, but then I realized if you get that wet, you are now carrying around freezing clothing. And that would be one tactic.
I mean, that's just hypothermia waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Metal itself is not necessarily great for existing in the cold.
True.
So
Kevlar.
How does Kevlar work against snow?
I suppose.
Well, I mean, it's bulletproof, so
you're not going to penetrate it with a snowball, is that?
Yeah, probably not.
Okay.
I don't know how warm it is, but I know it's fairly dense, so I imagine it'll keep some heat in.
Is it in like certain materials, does it become more brittle the lower the temperature drops?
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking the sciencey of science people, but like,
yeah,
it's
That's
a
a
thing to
gem.
factor in because we are dealing with temperatures.
I don't have a response to that because I don't know.
Kevlar does not lose much strength in extreme colds.
Okay.
Oh.
So we'll allow Kevlar.
This is from Kevlar's like actual site. So I assume it's either accurate or they're just lying.
I assume it's accurate or it's not. So I think I don't have anything to contribute to this beyond the fact that I like it because I didn't consider this until now. But what's cool about what we've landed on to me is we've discussed how, like, you know, different weaponry over the years was designed to get around certain defenses, and then those certain defenses were modified to protect against the new weapons, and it was like a, you know, mutual evolution of technology. And we're kind of exploring what would it be like if the world, like the technology of the world, evolved and it was all based on a different seed, which I wish I had more to say about. But it's cool.
I like these kind of discussions.
Because it's just, you know, the prompt is I have a snowball and I can throw it at you. And then you can figure out a thing to defend against that. And then I say, okay, well, I still have the snowball. I have to stick with that. But what can I add to it? And that's getting into a whole huge philosophical thing in my brain that I want to dedicate more time to.
Well, I also think, I mean, it just kind of bring up, this is a thing I'm kind of aware of because I'm just a dork. But a lot of people, when they're like, oh yeah, we're going to have a snowball war, cool, and everybody immediately thinks of weapons, but there is so much else to what makes warfare, even in real life, that it gets overlooked a lot. And things like, what are the armor, you know, like what's the design of the buildings? Also, stockpiling stores for a siege.
Oh.
So that if we're having a snowball war, it implies it's in winter, which suggests there's already lower resources as it is.
Okay.
Now, the upside is everything is very cold, and if your fort is literally made of ice, you can probably preserve food stores longer.
Fair.
So you can hold out a little longer, but like what are the odds that resources can get to you?
Well, that gets to another aspect of it, was what is the actual end game of this war.
Oh yeah, good point.
Generally, it's death or surrender.
Right. So like,
Ideally, surrender.
I just want to say it is harder to kill people with snowballs than it is with other weapons. Not that you can't do it.
It is, but you absolutely, if you piled enough snow on someone, like avalanches kill people, the force of the weight of it, and also just suffocation.
That's actually a thing I wanted to bring up is I was actually thinking about, like, because I was considering that a snow war on the scale of, I don't know, World War II, for instance.
Sure.
Yeah, that was the Russian front. They did that.
That's fair. I was thinking just using weaponized avalanches as your snowball war.
That is not a war crime in the snowball war. That's like fair.
I'm not even sure. I mean, it's got to be a war crime in real life, but I was Googling it and I couldn't find anything about it.
Modifying the weather is a war crime in real life. So like, I feel like it's on that level.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly assume it's a war crime, but...
However, though, causing things to collapse, like the idea of like a structural collapse being used against the enemy is used, like they have people that will tunnel under fortifications or tunnel in hillsides next to it to cause a landslide.
Yeah.
Like that's been done.
Or blow up Parliament.
Is a landslide a war crime?
Mulan tactically used an avalanche against her enemies.
Mulan predates the Geneva Convention.
In the Disney movie Mulan. I'm pretty sure real Mulan probably did not do that in the Disney version.
Oh, that's the sentence I never expected to say.
So that's why you get into this nebulous territory of like, I use the example of modifying the weather, but that's like specifically causing an avalanche the way that Mulan did. She just did that with an explosive, which she was originally going to shoot at a person, right? So like that, I don't think that you can call that less fair than just shooting an explosive at a person. We're
going to have a whole festive war crimes episode.
We should.
Then we get into... Someone
was killed with a sprig of holly once in Norse mythology. So festive war crimes.
Yeah, but in their defense, that's the only thing that could kill that guy.
It's true.
So they had to.
That's very specific, actually. Huh?
That's Balder, right?
Yep.
Yeah. He's immortal,
made famous by the gate.
Wait, is it holly or mistletoe?
It's mistletoe. Yeah.
Mistletoe. My bad.
Same argument though.
Yeah. Sorry, moving away from war crimes.
Moving away from war crimes.
If we must.
Please.
What would be the chemical gas spray of snow? Yellow
snow.
Yeah.
Or like that dirty slush that happens when they plow the highways.
Oh, yeah.
And gets into parking lots.
I enjoy that this is our Christmas episode.
Guys, you shouldn't have invited me. This was going to happen.
I mean, I think that's why we invited you.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
There's been at least... listen, if it's just battle and weird murder, we definitely talked about it on the Burnham Wood episode. This is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's Christmas. We should have the murder person on.
I mean, I'm more interesting than like the true crime people. Those are just boring serial killers.
There's just so many of them.
But like ice crossbows.
Ice crossbows. That's it, yeah.
I dig the ice crossbows. I think that's actually ingenious.
Well, that's interesting because I talked about the Mythbusters thing where the bullet would, burn up. And the whole point of it was that it was made of ice so it would melt so you wouldn't be able to trace it back to the gun.
Right.
And a crossbow, like, problem solved, right?
Yeah.
So, they might have mentioned that. I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a crossbow. I imagine with the right kind of mold, you can also use it for, like, you could probably make it work at close distances on things like longbows. But the problem with a longbow versus a crossbow is that when released, the arrow itself needs to flex.
Yeah.
Around the bow itself, which ice is not going to do. So that's why I think of crossbow.
What about just like a javelin?
Oh yeah, probably. I mean,
Okay.
They did that. They kind of did that in Game of Thrones. It's how they killed that one dragon. Spoilers, I guess, but no one cares about Game of Thrones anymore.
Isn't Isn't that interesting how
But-
it was like the
but-
biggest thing?
Well, because the writers gave up and the audiences said, "Oh, you don't care anymore? Cool, we don't either." But that is a thing. That is a thing they did. I mean, now these are supernatural ice creatures, the White Walkers they talk about, but he uses like a giant ice spear.
Well, I was thinking like an ice sword wouldn't be good because you couldn't make it durable enough to withstand impact.
Mhm.
And then an arrow, like a crossbow bolt, is smaller and shorter than an arrow. But an arrow, for it to be that long, it would have to be thin, and there's only so dense ice can be, so it's just going to break like an icicle. But, you know, everybody has probably at some point in their life seen a really thick icicle that you can't just break apart with your hands, and if you had like a javelin that's like that solid.
Oh, yeah.
So listeners, let us know, you know, if what would you do in a snowball war? I think that's... Jim, let's move on. Do we have any listener mail?
We surely do. And as always, if you want to send us listener mail, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. You can comment on our blog. You can like us on Facebook. You can tweet @vaguelysci. And this email comes to us from Al and is in regards to our last Christmas episode, episode 112, Santa's Flaming Zeppelin. And Al writes, this is about the question we had about strange ways to decorate our Christmas tree. And Al says, I always wanted to decorate my tree with edible things. One time I considered fruit, but I figure it would either go bad before I eat it or I'd have to wait until pretty late in December to put the tree up, so I never did it.
I just decorate the trees after I plant them with edible things, and then the birds eat them.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
I know that popcorn used to be very popular, but I'm not wasting popcorn on a tree. And also, you have to string it, and that's no fun.
You know, like a lot of these Christmas traditions came from a time when television didn't exist, so they needed something to do.
That's true.
You know, so they strung pop while you sat in the parlor and somebody knitted, which was more productive. I don't know.
Well, thank you very much for that email. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast, Google Play, and all the other great places that cool podcasts like to hang out. And don't forget, subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
Yeah, and it would be a nice Christmas present to us and to them.
Yeah. Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. I don't actually know when this episode is coming out at the time of recording, but I assume it's too late to get a present for somebody. But hey, Boxing Day, the 12th night, day 12 of 12th night, yeah. The thing.
It's December 20th is when this is coming.
Oh, the 20th? I don't know. If you really expedite your shipping, you might get something in time, but I wouldn't do that. You should have already shopped for your
You should have already done
family.
it. This is when you get the presents for the people you care less about.
Yes, and and that's exactly what you'd be doing.
Okay, well, on that really down note, from everyone here at Vaguely Scientific, we want to wish you the best of the December holidays.
Andy and his goat wish you a very freaking Christmas.
Hey, this is Brian. Have a happy holidays and a wonderful new year.
Merry Christmas.
Happy winter.
Wishing you a festive winter season.
So thank you to Anne for being our guest for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always fun time.
Yeah.
For Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Anne.
And Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next year.
Toodaloo 2023.
Bye.
Well, Well,
I don't want to say
know.
that buying something from our shop for your friends is a war crime, because it's not, and I think I might get in trouble for claiming that it is. So
I would at least discourage people from doing it, and we don't want that.
yeah, don't do war crimes, but do
Don't
buy
do
something
war
from our shop.
Yeah, they're not the same.
So true.